Nneka was tied to a large wooden stake, and piles of dry wood were stacked around her. The men of the village stood by with torches, ready to set the fire. Welcome to African Tales HQ. Once upon a time, in a place called Otu Village, there was a strange rule. The men in the village believed that women were not important. They thought women should only cook, clean, and obey their husbands without ever asking questions. The women of Otu Village were never allowed to speak up, even when their husbands made bad choices. They lived in fear every day, always careful not to make their husbands angry. The women walked around like they were on eggshells, afraid to say anything that could get them in trouble. One of the women in the village was named Nneka. Nneka was kind, gentle, and always tried her best to make her husband happy. But more importantly, Nneka loved God and often prayed for her husband and their home. She believed in doing what was right, even though she was afraid like the other women. Her husband, Carlo, was a proud man. He never listened to anyone, not even when Nneka tried to help him with good advice. As time passed, Carlo made many poor decisions, and his life started to fall apart. His farm was not doing well. He lost a lot of money, and their family was struggling. Nneka noticed all of this and felt sad for her husband. She believed that if she could just speak to him, maybe she would make better choices. But she knew the rule of Otu Village. Women were to be seen, not heard. One day, Nneka couldn't hold her thoughts anymore. She was so worried about her husband and their family that she finally decided to do something very brave. She took a deep breath and spoke to him. "My husband, may I ask you something?" she said carefully. Carlo turned to her, surprised. No one had ever dared to question him, especially not a woman. His face grew red with anger. "How dare you speak to me like this?" he shouted. "I make the rules in this house." "But my husband," Nneka continued, her voice trembling, "I only want to help you. I see that things have been hard, and maybe if you make some changes, things will get better." Carlo was furious. He didn't want to hear what Nneka had to say. In his pride, he stormed out of the house and went straight to the village chiefs. The chiefs were the leaders of the village, and they made all the important decisions. "My wife has disrespected me," Carlo yelled when he arrived at the chief's meeting place. "She dared to question me, and this is unacceptable in Otu Village." The chiefs listened to Carlo's complaint, and without even thinking twice, they decided that Nneka should be punished. According to the village rules, any woman who disobeyed her husband was to be put to death. And not just any death, they decided that Nneka should be burned alive as an example to all the other women. When Nneka heard the news, her heart sank. She was afraid, but she trusted God and knew that He was with her. Instead of crying or begging for her life, Nneka decided to fast and pray. She spent her last days praying, asking God to save her and to help the people of Otu Village see the truth. Meanwhile, the news of Nneka's punishment spread throughout the village, and soon it reached the ears of the king's wife, Queen Adaa. Queen Adaa was a wise woman, and unlike the other women in Otu Village, she was respected by her husband, the king. She had a strong voice and often gave the king advice on how to rule the village fairly. When Queen Adaa heard about Nneka, she was troubled. How can this be? Queen Adaa said to herself, "Nneka is being punished for trying to help her husband. This is not right." Queen Adaa went to the king and pleaded with him. "My husband," she said, "you are a wise and fair king. How can we allow such a cruel punishment in our village? This woman, Nneka, was only trying to do good. She does not deserve to die. The king listened carefully. He knew that his wife was right. The king was well-traveled and educated, and he knew that in other places, women were treated with respect and their voices were valued. He also knew that he was a better ruler because of the wisdom and advice of his wife. "I will do something about this," the king said, and he immediately sent word that he would attend Nneka's trial. The day of Nneka's punishment arrived. The villagers gathered in the town square, eager to see what would happen. Nneka was tied to a large wooden stake, and piles of dry wood were stacked around her. The men of the village stood by with torches, ready to set the fire. Just as they were about to light the flames, a loud voice called out, "Stop!" Everyone turned in surprise to see the king riding into the square on his horse, followed by his royal guards. The crowd parted as the king approached, his eyes stern and serious. "Untie her at once," the king commanded. The guards rushed to Nneka and freed her from the wooden stake. Nneka looked up in shock, tears filling her eyes as she realized the king had come to save her. The king stood before the crowd and spoke in a powerful voice. "People of Otu Village, today I have come to set things right. For too long, we have treated our women unfairly. We have silenced their voices and ignored their wisdom. But I tell you now, this must change." The villagers murmured in confusion. Some were angry, but most were simply surprised. They had always followed the village rules, but now the king was telling them those rules were wrong. The king continued, "A good woman is a blessing, not a burden. My own Queen Adaa has been by my side, advising me and helping me rule this village with fairness and justice. Without her, I would not be the king I am today. And yet, we punish women like Nneka for trying to help their husbands. This is not justice." The crowd was silent now, listening intently to the king's words. Many of the men looked at their wives, realizing for the first time that they had never really listened to them or appreciated them. From this day forward, the king declared, "Any man who treats his wife unfairly or unjustly will be punished. Our wives are our partners, not our servants. We will listen to them, respect them, and treat them with kindness. Only then will our village prosper." The villagers cheered, and Nneka fell to her knees, thanking God for saving her life. Kando, her husband, stood nearby, ashamed of what he had done. He realized that Nneka had only been trying to help him, and he vowed to be a better husband. From that day on, Otu Village changed. The men began to treat their wives with respect, and the women no longer lived in fear. The village became a place of peace and happiness. And because the families were stronger, the village grew richer and more prosperous than ever before. And so the story of Nneka, the brave woman who spoke up for what was right, was told for many generations. She became a hero, not just for the women of Otu Village, but for everyone who believed in fairness, kindness, and the courage to speak the truth. The end. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, kindly share your thoughts by commenting, support me with a super thanks, like, and subscribe. See you in my next video.